Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi everybody, my name is Chris Whalen and I'm an alcoholic. I'd like to thank Vince for giving me my cake, all of you, and thanks a million. Good night. Just kidding. I wish. I'd like to thank Clancy for having me come and talk here tonight. This is exciting and this is an honor. This is my home group. And as I look around this room tonight, I mean, I can't see a spot in this room where there's not somebody that I love a lot, and that means a lot to me. And it's just a good feeling to be up here. And I'd like to welcome the new people here to Alcoholics Anonymous tonight. The ones that stood up and raised their hands is new, and the ones that didn't, the ones that are sitting around the room, and they are new, and they didn't tell us that they were, because that's the way I was in my first few meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. I just showed up and left early and came late because I didn't want to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. That was not, I made a decision when I was 12 years old or 10 years old. That was one thing I did not want to be when I grew up, and that was an alcoholic, because my father came and joined AA when I was about 10 years old. And as far as I was concerned, everything was great around that house when, prior to him coming to AA. You know, just when he came to AA, the things went to pot. We had no problems around that house. I didn't hear the screaming and yelling that went on, and I didn't see my dad fall down drunk. You know, he used to take a nap once in a while on the kitchen floor, but we walked over him. You know, you could get to the refrigerator. And But when he came to AA and he came to this group, I mean, that was it. I mean, you know, he was gone a lot. He came to a lot of meetings and he got active in this group, and I just didn't see him that much anymore. You know, we didn't get to go to the movies as much as we used to, or those football games on Saturday night. You know, I can't talk about it anymore. It's just upsetting me so much. So that's the way I felt. You know, eventually my mother didn't find it necessary to go to Al-Anon, and the marriage broke up, and he moved away to Laguna Beach, and I blamed all that on him going to AA, because that's where it all happened. And so I made a decision at 10 years old I was not going to be an alcoholic. And that's too bad, because I could have used a drink about 10 years old. I guess the best way to describe me growing up was I was a weird kid. That's the best word, is weird. I had a lot of nervous disorders and twitches. I used to blink my eyes, and I used to shake my head like this, and I stuttered and stammered, and I was fat at around 13 years old. I weighed 165 pounds, and I had a 36 waist. You know, that's not husky like my parents told me. That's fat. And you know, come on, Chris. Sorry, you won't find your size over there. Go over here to the husky boys department. You know, and you know, I guess the way I felt was I felt like one of those little wind-up toys we used to have, where you wind them up, and when the spring gets tight, you set them down, and they start jumping around until the spring wore out. But my spring never seemed to wear out. I mean, you can see I'm a lot calmer now, obviously, but that's the way I felt as a kid. And the reason I'm here tonight in an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is not because I was an uptight kid, I think, or because my dad was an alcoholic and he came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and like I say, all that stuff that I felt at the time. I'm an alcoholic because I drank a lot of alcohol, and I took some drugs, and I didn't stop, and I have alcoholism, and that's why I'm an alcoholic, not because my parents put me in Catholic school, or because my dad was an alcoholic, because my mother had psychological problems. I can't blame it on that stuff. And you know, it'd be nice if I could, but I can't. And but the way it started out for me was at about 12 or 13 years old. My mother, like I say, was going through some psychological problems, and she was going to see these doctors and stuff. And she came home from the doctor's office one day, and she had a brand new little bottle of pills, little blue pills, and she was having a particularly bad day. And she came home about 4 o'clock. She took 2 of these little blue pills, and half an hour later, you know, she was feeling great. She went in the kitchen, fixed some meatloaf, and, you know, we had a great night. It was good meatloaf. And she got real calm. And I thought, Jesus, isn't that nice? You know, I could never get calm. I couldn't just sit down on the couch and watch television. I was always fidgeting and, you know. stuffing M&Ms in my mouth, so I could have my jaw moving at all times. And I saw her take these 2 little pills, and half an hour later she felt great. And a couple of days later I came home from school and no one was around, so I rummaged through that house and I found my mother's little bottle of Valium, and I took 2 of those little blue pills. And I'll tell you, 20 minutes later I wasn't fat anymore, and I didn't wiggle around, and I didn't even need an M&M, I tell you that. And I felt good. And I realized that's the kind of feeling I would like to relax a lot like that. And when you're 13, 14 years old, you can't, you don't call up your psychiatrist and say, "Hi, it's just Chris, I ran out of Valium, how about another prescription?" So you have to kind of become like what I did, a scavenger. And I got whatever I could from wherever I could get it. My favorite thing to do was to go over to my parents' homes for dinner at night. And I'd be sitting at the dinner table and I'd say, "Mrs. Williams, excuse me, but I have got to use your little boy's room." "Well, sure, little Chrissy, go right down the hall, turn left, and you'll find the bathroom over there." And I'd get in there, I'd turn the faucets on, flush the toilet 6 times, and get through that medicine cabinet and rifle through that thing and fill up my pockets full of everything I could find, and go back downstairs, finish my dinner, and go home and say, "Good night, Mom, good night, Dad." And I'd dump all those pills out on top of that bed, and I'd get this great book I'd stolen from this doctor. It was called a PDR. And it's called a physician's desk reference, and it's great. It has pictures of every pill that's ever been manufactured, and you match the pill with the picture, and you find the name, and you go to the back of the book, and you look it up, and the only section I cared about was a section called adverse reactions. That's all I cared about. And I looked for some key words in that section, like may cause drowsiness, or do not operate a motor vehicle, while you're taking this pen. But the best word, the one I really looked for, was stupor, causes stupor. I wanted to be in a stupor. That was the way I wanted to feel. And that's how I started out. And I got out of junior high school, and I got into high school. It was a little different then. You could pretty much, I worked on the weekends for my dad, and I got an allowance. And, we all save our money, our lunch money and stuff like that, and buy drugs. So that's what I did. And it got a little easier. I got out of high school, immediately got a job. And this was a good job for a kid right out of high school. It was working for a company that basically what my job consisted of was I'd go to work at 4 in the afternoon, I'd load this truck full of musical equipment, and I'd drive to the Forum. And I'd set up a rock concert, and then I'd have nothing to do until 11:30. I'd tear it down and go back to Hollywood and drop this stuff off. So I got to sit around and watch a rock concert and take a lot of drugs. And it was a great job, except I had to drive a truck. And I'd finished, working, and I could hardly even see straight, let alone get a piano in the back of a truck. And I'd get that thing in there, and I'd drive home, and you take a left turn, or a right-hand turn, and you take 6 parked cars out with you. And I got lost in Burbank one night, and I tried to make a shortcut through a Mexican food restaurant, and I drove through it and turned it into a drive-through. And the lady's looking at you with a clipboard in your hand, waiting for her to say, will that be 2 or what, And finally, I lost that job after about 6 months, and they came to me and they said, "Chris, you're a real nice kid. Everybody likes you around here, but we just can't have you working here for us anymore. Our insurance people called us last week, wanted to know who this Chris Whalen kid was, and why is he still working there?" And I said, "Well, I can understand why you got to let me go, but at least you said I was a nice kid." And I left that job, and I got fired from that job. I didn't leave that job. About a week and a half later, I got another good job. This time it was working for a company that sold and distributed European bicycles and bicycle parts. And I was pretty much the everything boy. I shipping and receiving, and I delivered these bicycles out to the bike stores and stuff like that, and it was a good job. But unfortunately, I got in a little bit of trouble. Bob's Bikes in the Valley would call me, and they'd say, "Chris, we need 6 number 204 bikes. Can you bring them out tomorrow?" I'd say, "No problem. I'll be right out tomorrow morning." And I'd put 6 on the truck for Bob's Bikes, 3 on the truck for Chris's bikes, and on the way out there to the valley or whatever, I drop the 3 bicycles off in my garage, and I go about and do my job, come home, and I call this friend of mine who also worked in the valley, and he had the same job I had, but his was at a pharmacy. And he liked bikes, and I was taking a lot of pills, and it was a match made in heaven. The rest is AA history. And he'd say, "Chris, I'd love to have those bikes. What would you like?" And I'd say, "I like those little blue pills that I can't seem to get enough of those things." And he'd say, "No problem." And he'd come over with these jars of 1,000 of these things, and these 10 milligram volumes. And I started taking these things like crazy. I just couldn't get enough of them. By the time I stopped taking those pills, I was taking 250 milligrams of those a day, and that slows your way down. I lost a lot of that weight. I wasn't wiggling. It was kind of hard to get the fork to your mouth, so you don't eat a lot. But unfortunately, no matter how, I lost that job too, because matter of fact, I lost that job because I got fired for stealing a bicycle rim, which I just didn't think was fair. I mean, I told them that. I said, listen, I've stolen dozens of bicycles from you guys. And you fire me for a bicycle rim? And they said, get out of here, kid, or we're going to call the police on you. Well, I said, thank you very much, and I left. And unfortunately, I was taking, like I say, a lot of those pills. And you don't have to be an alcoholic or a drug addict to become addicted to Valium. All you need is a big jar like I had. And I always ran out, no matter how many I had. No matter how many I had, I always ran out. And unfortunately, when you take the amount of Valium I was taking, what would happen to me is 13 to 21 days after I finished the last pill, my body just couldn't take it anymore. And I started having these seizures, grand mal seizures, a lot like epileptics have. And the first one was not that bad. It really wasn't. I was laying in bed and I had this seizure. Some friends were over. They watched me wiggle around for an hour, for 5 minutes. And I woke up and someone had a washcloth on my head, and I said, what are you doing to me? I didn't know what had happened. I was kind of out of it. It didn't bother me. But the second one I had, it was in the backseat of somebody's car. This time I was out in public, and you don't do that in public. They call an ambulance, and the ambulance came. By that time I was already walking around. But the third one I had was on the Santa Monica freeway at 9 in the morning. And, you go into a seizure on the freeway at 9 in the morning, you're going to cause a little damage. And I did. I hit a car, and I pulled over, and by the time my car, I don't know how I pulled over, by the time I got over to the center divider, the guy was out there, and he was, wanted to know what had happened, and I said, I don't know, I guess I hadn't known one of those things that had been happening to me. And we exchanged numbers and went on our way. But I had one more. That one was just like I was standing out in the backyard one day, and I had one, but the last one I had was probably the most serious, and I had it again on the Santa Monica freeway, this time coming west, and this was 4 o'clock in the afternoon during rush hour traffic, and I ended up flipping out on the freeway, and a highway patrol car saw what was happening to me, and he kind of put his car into the side of mine and sent me into the center divider, and they arrested me and took me down to Parker Center, where they gave me a bunch of tests, try to find out what I was on. But I'd run out of those pills, 20 days or so ago, and I tested negative for everything, and they said, well, you better get some help. And they suggested I go into a hospital and find out why I was having these seizures, and I did. I checked into St. John's for about 10 days and had every test imaginable. I was probably the only one that diagnosed myself. It was amazing. And I left that hospital 10 days later, and I was an epileptic. Sounded fine to me. I didn't care. They said, here, take these pills. You'll be fine. And I took them. And they had phenobarbital. I looked them up in that book I had. By that time, the DMV was on my case, and that started about a 3-year fight to keep my driver's license. And I'd lost that bicycle job, and a month later, I got another job. That was about 15 years ago, and that's the same job I have today, which is amazing in itself. And this is not really what I considered a good job. I had to go downtown Los Angeles. I had to join the Teamsters, and I became just a worker, just like everybody else. Down there, it was hard work. I was, driving a forklift, and I started on a Monday morning, and I showed up at 7 o'clock, and I said, hi, I'm Chris. I'm starting today. Can you please tell me where my little office is? Or I must have a desk somewhere. And they said, your forklift's over there, Slick. And that was my first rude awakening down there. And it got to be about 11 o'clock. I didn't feel like I belonged down there. I felt terrible. They were all older. I was the youngest guy working there at the time, and I just thought, I'm never going to feel okay here. And a guy came over to me at about 10:30 and said, at 11 o'clock, we all go over here to the Produce Bar and Grill, over here on 7th and Central Street. And that's where we have lunch and have a couple of beers. Why don't you come along and you can meet the guys that work down here. And I said, sure, that'd be great. And I went over there at 11 o'clock, and they all went to the bar and ordered a beer, got in a bottle, and went over to the little grill over there and ordered a sandwich. And I hated the taste of beer. I had taken a couple of sips. I had not been a drinker up to this point. I was 18 years old, and I could probably count on one hand how many drinks I had had. And I did not want to be an alcoholic, like I say. But I didn't want a beer. I wanted to feel like I belonged down there, and I walked up to that bar, and for some reason, what came out of my mouth was, sure, I'll have a double vodka Collins. Now, I don't know where I got the double vodka Collins from. I must have seen it in a movie or something. But that's what I asked for, and he said sure, and I drank that first double vodka Collins down. It tasted great. I ordered another one. I drank that second one down, and ordered a third one. And about halfway through that drink, something happened to me. I got the best feeling I'd ever had in my life. And I remember when I finished that drink, I thought, Jesus, now I understood what my dad drank so many years. Isn't it too bad he had to go to AA and screw all that feelings up? And And I'll tell you, that was it for me. I mean, the best way to describe how I felt was from the play by Tennessee Williams, Cat in the Hot Tin Roof, where if you know that movie, it was a scene where Brick, who the character is sitting in this like parlor or living room, in the South with his father, and his father's saying to him, why do you drink so much? How come you just drink? You just keep on drinking. And he looks at his father and he says, I don't know. I drink, and I get to a point where I kind of like a switch goes on, and I get a cool feeling, and like the lights dim, and it just makes me feel good. And that's exactly the reason I drank from that point on, because it made me feel like I wanted to feel. It made me feel better than all those pills I had messed around with and the marijuana I'd smoked. That was all real nice, and it made me feel good. But the alcohol gave me a feeling like that I always wanted to feel, just a feeling of well-being. That's just the way I wanted to feel. And it did not take a long time from that Monday morning down there at the Produce Bar and Grill until I became a daily drinker, because I wanted that feeling. I never quite got the feeling I got when I got halfway through that third drink, and I remember that feeling I got, but I drank to get that feeling every day almost from that point on. And that's about as exciting as I guess as my drunk-a-log gets. I crashed a lot of cars. By the time I lost my driver's license at about the age of 20 or 21, I had 15 automobile accidents, but the most important, I guess, accident for me is the last one I had. I mean, I was fighting with the DMV because they wanted this driver's license. They had looked at my record, and they had seen at this time 14 automobile accidents, seizures on the freeway. This kid shouldn't be driving. Get that kid out of here. I had a lawyer working, trying to get my license saved, and it was hard. They were just going to take it away. And I got off work one day after stopping at that little Produce Bar and Grill, and I had a lot to drink, and I drove home to West Los Angeles, and for some reason I was on National, found myself on National Boulevard, and I kind of woke up, and I looked up in front of me, and there was a big Times truck, that kind of delivers the newspapers, and I rear-ended that truck going about 40 miles an hour, and I ended up going through the windshield of that car. And on the way through that windshield, unfortunately, there was a steering wheel in the way, and it got caught in my face and ripped a big chunk of my face out. And I was scared. It's the first time I was scared when I had had an automobile accident. And I remember when the ambulance came and they pulled me back into the car because they found me laying on the hood. It's funny, isn't it funny? Yeah. First thing I said to this ambulance driver was, "How does it look?" And he looked at me and he went, "Yeah, it looks great." And I went, "Oh, geez, it's all over now. I can't even be a Teamster anymore, probably." And I got to the hospital, and luckily they didn't work on me right there. They called in a specialist, and he was able to pretty much put my face back to normal, and I was lucky. But what I thought of as I was leaving that hospital was, the first thing I said was, they can have that driver's license. I don't want it anymore, because the fight was out of me. I realized that this time I was real lucky, and I could have been killed this time. I probably could have been killed a lot of other times, but something kind of clicked this time, and I said, fine. And I called that lawyer. I told him, forget it. They can have that driver's license, and they took it away. And I'm 20. I was around 20 years old, and my license was gone, and 19, 20 years old, and I just didn't think it was fair, but it was okay. I was better to, keep my body, I guess, intact than to drive. So I began taking the bus, and I was working downtown, living in West Los Angeles, and a typical day for me would be I'd get up, the alarm would go off at 5 in the morning, and I'd turn the alarm off, and I'd go to the kitchen, and I'd pour myself a tall glass of Smirnoff vodka, and I'd drink that down, and I'd go in and I'd brush my teeth, come out, get dressed, get on a series of 3 buses to downtown, and get off the bus on 7th and Central Street, and go into that little bar and drink as much as I can until 7 o'clock, and run over to work, punch in, work until 11 o'clock, go to lunch, drink as much as I could through lunch, and work until 3:30, and get off at 3:30, punch out, go over there to that little bar and drink as much as I could so I could make it home, get on the bus and make it home. Most of the time I made it home, but a lot of times I just passed out on the bus, and I ended up at the end of the line. If I had $1, for every time I had a bus driver shaking me saying, hey kid, end of the line. It's nice when they recognize you. You fell asleep again, and okay, and you get up and you go and you take the bus back the other way, and I go get off on my corner on Fairburn and Santa Monica Boulevard, and I go into the Fairburn liquor store, and I tell the guy behind the counter to give me one of those pints of Smirnoff vodka. You get a pint. Now, if you're going out, and if you're new and you still want to go out and go drinking, the little trick is you don't buy those big bottles. Don't get the quarts or the half gallons, because the big bottles are what the alcoholics drink, the big bottles. Get the smaller ones, and they don't know. So I went in there and I said, give me one of those pints of Smirnoff vodka, and I took that home, and I started drinking it. By about 7 o'clock, the bottle was empty, and I'd go back across the street or stumble across the street and walk in there, and I'd say, "How you doing, bud? You know, she's drinking again, you know, and I need another one of those bottles." And, you know, or the guys came over, they're playing cards, and, you know, after you do that for 5 years, you know, Bud knows, you know, that she's not drinking again, you know. You know how much that'll be, don't you, Chris? You know, and they got it in the bag already, you know, and I'd take that bottle across the street, and I'd usually get, you know, to the bottom of the bottle just enough for that next drink the next morning, and I'd pass out on that couch in that same spot in front of that television set every night, and that's what I did it for about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And there was a guy, a long time, I still remember, of Alcoholics Anonymous. His name was Eddie Regan, and he used to talk about alcoholism being a disease of gradualness. And in his case, he'd end up in this terrible jail somewhere, like in Signal Hill or something. And the first, you know, 4 or 5 times he ended up in this jail, he couldn't believe he ended up in this god-awful place again. But after 36, 40 times ending up in the same jail, it was no big deal anymore. Gradually, he'd become used to it, and he'd walk in and he'd say, "How you doing, guys? Is there any mail?" And now, I related to that because, I mean, the first few months I passed out on that same cushion every night. I mean, it appalled me. I couldn't believe it. How did I pass out? Or in those days, it was, how did I fall asleep on the couch again last night? And, you know, I'd wake up at about 4 in the morning and just enough time to get an hour's worth of sleep in bed. I'd just do that thing over and over and over again. And in the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, it tells us that we're blessed and that we'll have a moment of clarity. And my moment of clarity didn't come with any special deal. It was just like any other day. I got off work on a Friday, stopped at that little bar, drank as much as I usually did, and I got back on the bus. And on that bus ride home that afternoon, I started thinking about it being Friday and how everybody was going to go out and have fun. Probably had dates, and maybe they were going to go to a movie or something. And I knew I wasn't, because by that time nobody wanted to be around me anymore, because I had turned into just a blackout, pass-out, vomiting, stumbling alcoholic is what I was. And it's not fun to be around when you vomit all over your friends, you know. That's not telling them that you like them, you know. And I started thinking, you know, I could not in my mind place the last time I'd been out anywhere and had fun, or gone and done anything, or been out on a date. I couldn't get it to focus. I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone out and done anything. And I made a point by the time I got on that third bus, and I was almost home, but I was going to go out. It's Friday night. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have fun tonight, no matter what it takes. And I stopped at Fairburn Liquor like I always did. I got that first bottle, and I went over and I had a couple of drinks, and I made a series of about 10 or 11 phone calls to friends that I had, and each one of them I asked, you know, come on, let's go somewhere. Come on over. I'll take you anywhere you wanted to go, the movies or dinner. Just come on over. I just need to go out somewhere. And everybody had an excuse of why they couldn't go out with me. A few of them even recounted to me what had happened the last time they had gone out with me, how I had passed out in my blue cheese dressing at a restaurant, or vomited in their car, some god-awful thing like that. And I almost gave up, and I made one last phone call to a good girl, a girlfriend that I had in high school. And I said, "Come on over, please, and I'll take you anywhere you wanted to go." And I sounded desperate. And she didn't want to go out with me anywhere. I don't blame her, but she said, "I'll come over and see how you're doing." And she came over about an hour later, and I stumbled to the door with drool down my shirt, and and I came back over and I plopped back down on that couch, and she took one look at me, and she pretty much took my inventory from me right there, and she told me what I had turned into. She had watched me over the years, and I turned into, no matter, she said to me, "Chris, it's no wonder you couldn't get anybody to go anywhere, to go out with you tonight, because you're just no fun to be with. You're just a fallen down drunk." And I had heard that a lot over the years. I had heard you, "Chris, why do you always have a glass of vodka in your hand so much?" So, I quit drinking vodka for an entire year, and I drank nothing but beer, which you found out, it gets you, you drink a few more beers, and you got to take a leak a little more often, but it all gets you there. And so I had heard that before, but something happened that night, and I heard what she had said, and I realized that she was right. I was an alcoholic, and I was a drunk, and there's probably nobody, few people have had the kind of examples that I grew up with of Alcoholics Anonymous. I mean, I used to play in Clancy's yard. I used to go to that meeting with my dad and meet all those great people at that Tuesday night meeting they had over at Ohio Street, and I grew up around Alcoholics Anonymous. So, you might think that I would have known better, but I didn't, because, you hear this from 9 out of 10 speakers get up there and they say it, but I really felt that you don't understand if you felt like I felt, you had to have a drink now and then. That's the way I felt. I had to have something to make me feel better because I didn't feel well all the time. So she left, and the funny thing, about 3 days before she came over and told me what had happened to me, you know, and a friend of mine had come over to just kind of check and see how I was doing. Like, some of my friends used to come over and like make spot checks if he's still breathing. And he'd come over to visit me, and he had his new girlfriend with him. And she had about 2 years sober in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she took one look at me, and she was going to make a project out of me, I'll tell you that. And she started telling me about AA, and I listened for about 3 seconds and said, "Don't tell me about AA, sweetie. You know, I was going to those meetings when you were in diapers, you know. Don't tell me. I'm glad it worked for you, and I'm glad you're happy. Now get out of here," you know. And she left. And you know, but after that Friday, the following Monday, I called her on the phone and I said, "Hi, remember me? I'm Chris." "Yeah, I remember you all right." And I told her I'd like to go to a meeting with her. I'd like to go to a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I went to my first meeting as a member of Alcoholics Anonymous on December 1st of 1982, a Tuesday night meeting over at 2+2 meeting over there in Westwood. And now, I'd like to tell you that it hasn't been necessary for me to drink anything or use any drugs since December 1st of 1982, but it's been necessary quite a bit, especially in that first year. I found it necessary almost every week or almost every day. I didn't take the first drink, and I didn't use any drugs, but I did find it necessary. And I'd like to tell, if you're new, I'd like to tell you why I found it necessary in my first year to drink. Like I say, I didn't raise my hand in the beginning, and I didn't identify as an alcoholic, and I didn't do much of all but pretend that I was feeling okay, is what I did. I pretended things were going great. And if you had come up to me and asked me how I was doing, I would have said, "I'm doing great." I mean, what do you mean, how am I doing? I'm in AA now, I'm sober. You know, compared to what I used to be like, this is great. And I finally got a sponsor, a nice guy, a good member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And probably if I had done the things that he had suggested I do, and I was truthful with him, and I was telling him how I was, if I had told him how I was feeling all along, I probably would have felt pretty good. I probably would have started to feel a little bit better. And he asked me to write an inventory, and I wrote an inventory. I wrote 65 pages of the Chris Whalen story, and it was great. And he read it, he listened to it, and but he said, you know, write one like it says in the book. And I wrote that one, and I wasn't honest. I just wanted to get it over with. I'd gotten a sponsor probably because I was sick of hearing people say, "Chris, get a sponsor." Same reason I got a big book, because I was tired of people saying, "Chris, do you have a big book yet?" And I said, yes. Finally, I had a big book. I could get them off my back. And I had commitments, and that's probably the only thing that probably kept me sober that first year, was I had a commitment at every meeting I went to. And I went to a meeting every night because I had nothing else to do. I had lost most of my friends, and in my first probably 6 months, I went to a meeting every single night because I had nothing else to do. And I found myself almost a year sober and feeling terrible, feeling probably just as bad as I had felt when I first came to AA. And I didn't know why. I just felt terrible. And I kept going to meetings, and I kept showing up for these commitments, and I just kept feeling worse. And I made a decision one night after a meeting. I feel terrible. Why am I going to AA? This is ridiculous. I mean, I feel terrible. I can sit home and watch, you know, the Newlywed Game and still feel this bad. And I made a decision to leave AA. I'm going to resign from this thing. I gave it a try. And but I went to another meeting that night. I had a commitment, and I went back. There was another Tuesday night, and I went to the meeting just like I was used to by now. And I heard a guy named Howard P. speak. And he talked about how he was feeling pretty much the same way I was feeling in his first year, and that he was going to leave AA too. And he told a little story about how he felt like this, and he shared how he was feeling with his sponsor. And his sponsor looked at him and he said, "Well, that's fine, Howard. If you want to leave AA, that's great. But when you go back to that little bar of yours that you drink at, and the bartender says to you, 'What's the matter, Howard? I thought you went to AA. Doesn't AA work?' Well, be honest with that bartender and tell him that you don't know because you haven't tried to work this program." And I heard what he said that night, and I realized that's my story. I haven't been trying to work this thing. I wrote that inventory to get someone off my back. I screwed those first 3 steps. Well, you know, why not? The only one they're going to know you worked is that 4th one. And I realized that I had not given it my best shot. And I made a decision that night when I went home that I'm going to stay for a while, and I'm going to do the best job I can. I'm going to try to work this program the best that I could. And shortly after that happened, Maria my wife, joined the Pacific group. She joined the softball team, and we started coming here on Wednesday nights, and I became a regular member here. And I went to my first yard and on a Saturday morning, and I asked Vince to be my sponsor, and life has not been the same since. He got me busy here in AA. He got me active. Not long after I got him as a sponsor, he gave me 7 questions, and he said, just answer these thoroughly and honestly, and it'll constitute a good inventory. And I did. I answered those 7 questions to the best of my ability, and I was honest. And I put down everything that I could come up with, that I could imagine that I had ever done or thought or whatever it was that I had done into that thing. And I remember a few weeks later, I read that to him one night when he went to talk somewhere, and a funny thing happened is that I felt real good after I read that to him. I felt like I was close with this man, and that I was glad he was my sponsor, and I had shared all those feelings that I had had over my life. And I didn't have that feeling that first time. I probably could have if I was honest, but I didn't have those feelings. And I felt great. It was the first time I remembered that I really started feeling good since I'd been sober. And he got me busy right away. He told me things to do, and I did them. They weren't big deals. I mean, he told me to get a checking account. I got a checking account. It made me feel great when I wrote that first check to pay for my rent instead of, counting out $20 bills to pay my rent. I felt great. But he came with me. He came to me one day with one that I just didn't think was too good. He said, Chris, it's time for you to get a driver's license. And I said, well, Vince, I wrote that inventory for you, and I didn't give you any problems, but you don't understand. I mean, they revoked this driver's license. I mean, it's, I had seizures and accidents, and he said, Chris, just get a driver's license. And I think he probably, knowing my sponsor, he probably hung up on me or walked away after saying, get a driver's license. And so I looked into it, and I called the DMV, and the DMV said, well, you got to go to Inglewood, because that's where the main motor vehicles thing is. So I called them up, and I made an appointment, and I went down there after work one day, and I had to go in front of like a little panel of 3 judges, DMV judges, it was a wonderful experience. And I pretty much had to do what I'm doing right now tonight. I had to tell them what it used to be like, what happened, and what I'm trying to be like today. And, and I told them, I didn't have these seizures because I was an epileptic, and those automobile accidents, well, I used to drink a little and take some drugs, and I said I used to drink a lot and take a lot of drugs, and they listened to me, and I went back for another DMV hearing, and I knew I wasn't going to get a driver's license because they had a file on me, and it was like this, and they were passing this file, through the 3 of them, and they would read something, and then they would look at me and they would just go like this, And I went, that's it, well, I gave it my best shot, I'm already thinking, well, Vince, I did the best I could, and they said no, but I left there. They didn't say anything. They didn't say whether I got it or whether I didn't get it, but in the meantime, about a dozen people from this group wrote letters to the DMV and told them that I was sober now about 2 years, and I was an active member in this group, and that I was a responsible person, and they received those letters. I saw them up there. And that was a good feeling, that I had people behind me, people from this group. And about 3-4 weeks later, I got a letter in the mail saying, I got a driver's license. And, that doesn't sound like a big deal to probably most people here, but I had not driven a car, had a driver's license in 8 years. And when I finally got that thing in the mail with my picture on it, I felt like $1,000,000. I felt great. I couldn't believe it. And all I had done was just done what my sponsor told me to do, is just go and take the action of getting a driver's license. Whether or not I thought I was going to get it or not, I took the action. And it worked out okay, and I felt great. And when I was about, about 9 months sober, I showed up at that Brentwood beginners meeting one Thursday night, and at the 7 o'clock meeting, and I walked in there and I saw a pretty girl sitting in the second row, and she had dark glasses on, and she was kind of nodding out. And I took one look at her, and I said, that's the girl for me. And I walked over to her, and I said, hi, I'm Chris, what's your name? And she said, I think you better get away from me. I'm not sober yet. I said, don't worry about it. We'll fix that. And we became good friends, and we started dating. And, she had a hard time getting sober. I can't understand why. And but when she came to this group, she finally got sober, and we kept dating. And in this October, we'll have been married 2 years. And that's amazing. I was a fallen down drunk who my phone never rang. My phone never rang, and I had nothing to do, and I'm married now, and I still have that same job. And along with the marriage, it was kind of a good deal because I got a wife and a child, and I didn't even have to do anything. It just came along with the deal. And I could go on for another evening with just what's gone on with Riley, her son, and I. I'm a stepfather now, right? doesn't sound right. Chris, father, I mean, something's wrong. And, but it was tough in the beginning because, you know, I show up on the scene and hi Riley, I'm Chris, I'm your new dad, you know, and screw you, you know, and it was tough. And Maria was going to school, you know, on Thursday nights after we'd been married about 4 months. And Thursday nights was spelling night. You know, he'd come home with these 22 spelling words, you know, and he'd have to learn them by Friday, the next day. He had to know how to spell these words. And we'd do fine with about 3 words. But after he got through that third world, you know, Jesus, he just didn't want to learn anymore. He didn't want to learn anymore. He'd just sit there and he wouldn't do his work. And it used to make me crazy. I mean, we used to sit there for 4 or 5 hours just to get through 10 words, and it was making me nuts. And this went on for about a month. And, you know, after about the 5th week, we sat down at that table, and we were looking at each other, and I said, Riley, learn these words. And he just sat there, and he looked at me. He didn't do anything. He says, I won't learn them. I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go watch TV. And I flipped out. I mean, I grabbed this little 8-year-old kid, and I picked him up by the shirt, and I threw him on the ground. And I jumped on him, and I started sitting on him, and I was shaking him. And I was saying to me, you don't understand. If you don't learn these, you know, you gotta learn how to do your homework. If you know, you're going to become a dummy when you grow up. You'll end up being like a lawnmower repairman or something. And you know, and I'm shaking this kid and yelling and screaming, and now he's yelling and crying, and I got my hand over his mouth so the neighbors won't hear. You know. You know, then finally something snapped in me, and I thought, Jesus, you know, what am I doing? What if my wife came home? We've been married 4 months, so here I am on top of her child, shaking him. I mean, that would be the end of that marriage. What's going on here? And I realized that, what am I? You know, I'm an old man. I'm older. I'm on top. You know, I picked him up, and I kind of got a hold of myself, and I kind of brushed him off and straightened him up. And I put my arm. You know, what I did was I put my arms around him, and I gave him a hug, and I told him I loved him. And everything kind of calmed down. And as we didn't finish spelling, because, you know, I was like catatonic, but I realized that was the first time in all the years that we had gone out, and the whole time we were married, that I'd ever told that kid that I loved him. And I did all the time. I loved that little kid, and I never told him that. And shortly after that, I had some physical problems. I had some surgery, and I was off of work for about 3 months. And during those 3 months, I got to pretty much spend almost every day with him, and I got to take him to school in the morning and pick him up, and we did errands together, and we spent a lot of time together. And I can tell you today that we have a good relationship together. It's best when we're alone for some reason. We're alone, we have a lot of fun. You know, and that's not the way it was in the beginning. I mean, I can't be like that with people. I have a good life today. I mean, a couple of years ago, I got the thrill of my lifetime. I got to go to that Montreal convention that they had for the 50th year anniversary of Alcoholics Anonymous. On the plane over, Clancy came over to me and he said, Chris, I'd like you to participate in the opening ceremony that they're going to have there at the stadium where the Montreal Expos play. And I was thrilled. I couldn't believe it. I was excited. And I went over there and we practiced and we had a lot of fun. And it was great. Barney remembers Barney. Barney was our announcer. But what I want to tell you is that the day finally came, and I remember the march. What I got to do is I got to march out with leading 4 flags, and we had flags representing every country that Alcoholics Anonymous was in, and all the flags from all the countries were marched out, and I got to lead 4 flags out. And when I came out of that tunnel, and I looked around, and I saw 45,000 alcoholics screaming and yelling, I mean, I got a feeling like I couldn't tell you. I got a feeling that was better than that Monday morning when I was sitting in that little bar and I had those 3 drinks. I got such a warm feeling that it was better than all those pills I'd ever taken. It was just the best feeling I had ever had because I was a part of this. 45,000 people, and I was a part of them. And I got to participate in this thing. It was the greatest feeling that I could ever imagine. And my life is great. If you're new here to Alcoholics Anonymous, try to think of AA as being like the world's largest lost and found, where you can come and you can get a chance to start your life all over again. Because that's what happened to me, and that's what can happen to you if you're new. And thanks for having me.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.